Welcome back. More than 2,000 delegates are meeting at the DA conference in Midrand to elect new leaders this weekend and to vote on policy and constitutional changes. The Congress is being seen as a two-horse race between the incumbent DA leader John Steenhuisen and former Joburg Mayor Mpho Phalatse. It is the biggest federal Congress in the party's history, and crucially, it will set the tone as the official opposition heads into elections next year. We speak now to former DA leader Tony Leon. Remember, during his time, the DA grew from a tiny party with less than 2% of the vote in 1994. It is now the official opposition with nearly 21% of the vote in the last national election in 2019, although that was down slightly. Leon retired from Parliament in 2007. Of course, he was an ambassador, but retiring from that in 2012, he now chairs a communications company. Mr. Leon, thank you for being with us. So you're speaking to us from your home in Cape Town. Are you happy to be out of the political fray in Midrand, or are you missing out in a sense on being in on the action?
Well, I got an invitation to attend the Congress, but I thought I've been to so many in my time that the new crop of leaders must attend to it, and they don't need me breathing down their shoulders or over their shoulders. So I'm happy both to watch the progress of the party and also to say, I had 13 rather tumultuous years as leader. I started when I was 37. I quit when I was 50, and that is now 16 years ago. So, a lot has happened to the country, to the party, to me personally, and I did my best from where I was with what I had, as the saying goes, with President Roosevelt. And I'm impressed with the progress the party's made, and I'm deeply aware of the problems that face it. Any opposition in South Africa, really, particularly the largest opposition party in the country, because it's not a straightforward, easy ride. And I know I've still got the scars on my back from my time at the helm. And I think it's great that they've got committed and competent helmsmen and helmswomen taking it forward.
Yeah. Well, let's look at a DA-specific problem. Given the incredible revelations about corruption in the governing party, many have commented that the time would be right for an official opposition, maybe once it was hard to conceive the DA being in government. But perhaps now the time is right for an opposition to rise up. And yet the DA hasn't really... Carry on.
Yeah, just the connection's a bit unstable. I don't know whether to blame Eskom or my internet provider, Francis, but...
All right, no problem. And please tell me if this is not clear. I said one of the DA's problems is capitalizing on the perceived weakness of the governing party right now, is gaining votes, because now, perhaps more than ever, we can conceptualize another party becoming the majority party in South Africa. But if you look at the votes between the last national election, it was down slightly, and the needle didn't shift during the local government elections. Helen Zille, I don't know if you heard her speaking to my colleague, seems flummoxed. Why do you think the DA is not growing?
Well, I think there are a number of explanations, and it's no good. You can't. A management of a company can't go and blame the customers for not buying its wares. It's got to look at its own management. And I guess that's part of what the leadership election's about, is who's managing it best, or who can manage it best, and they'll make a democratic determination on that. I would say there's a lot of history behind voter choices in South Africa. It's not just saying this government's terrible, corrupt, leads to unemployment, all the things that people know to be so. But I think there is a lot of history. We're a young democracy, 29 years old, 30 years next year. So I think it's been quite difficult for any opposition party, even one, conceived in a laboratory that said go and design the best possible opposition permutation ever to take power in South Africa. Even that would be hard pressed because of a lot of facts, whether they are apartheid past, the issue of race and its persistence, and so on. But I mean, that's an explanation. It's not a prediction of the future. I do think South Africa now is far more open to the choice of an alternative. And, Francis, when I was the leader, I was asked by a famous French politician, the Prime Minister at the time, Francis Jospin. He said to me, well, are you an opposition or are you an alternative? And I think what the DA does tomorrow, the leader's speech and going forward, will determine whether it's just going to continue to be an opposition, which is very important democracy, or be the fulcrum of a real alternative for power. I think that's an open question. I don't think it's a closed question.
Can I ask you to be less diplomatic and talk about race? That's huge in this country. And of course, the DA talks a lot about constitutional liberalism, clinging to pure liberalism, meritocracy. But given how most South Africans feel, even many white South Africans, given our history, do you think that the DA needs a black leader?
Well, the DA had a black leader, as it happens, and I'm not, you can't say because it had a black leader and it had its first reversal in a general election as it's had under that particular leader, that forever and a day black leadership takes a party backwards or white leadership takes a party forwards. I think that would be completely incorrect and inaccurate. But I think the party did try very hard by creating a leadership situation where a person didn't have the experience of leadership or in the party was made the leader to meet exactly the challenge that you describe. And that process and that period was not crowned with success for the party. That's a matter of arithmetical fact as calculated by the IEC at the last general election. It's not what I think. And under white leaders, the party's, gone up and down and so forth. So I think in and of itself, the racial identity of the leader is not going to be conclusive of anything. After all, if you take every other opposition party in South Africa, I think all of them except for the Freedom Front have black leaders. They've been far less successful in getting votes than the DA has, which is why the DA is the largest opposition party in South Africa. But, it is a factor.
The DA seems stuck. It seems stuck at about 20%.
Yeah, look, it is a factor, but I think there are many other factors. I mean, to me, what's unprecedented as a factor in our politics is that my former, well, I wouldn't say a sparring partner, but we went toe-to-toe when he was president. I was leader of the opposition. Thabo Mbeki last week came out in a full frontal assault on Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, that has never happened in my political history or time. So I think we're in a much more febrile political space than we've ever been. And the DA needs to be aware of what it can do and what it can't do. And it might be, Francis, that there is, for whatever reasons, whether it's the leader, whether it's the identity, whether it's history, that the DA can reach a certain point or ceiling, and then it's got to find allies, it's got to find partners that it can cooperate with, so that together, not just one party, but several parties who have a broad common approach, can actually credibly take power in this country. And I think that's part of the conversation, because we can forever and a day go on about what the DA should be, what it really is. And I think what you're seeing at that Congress in Gallagher State is more of the real DA than the DA that's cartoonishly portrayed sometimes on Twitter and elsewhere. But, in and of itself, are they going to be part of a new government? Are they going to be the sole party of government? I think they will be part, or they have a chance of being part of a new government. And to me, intelligent and imaginative arrangements to make that a credible offer before next year is the order of business for the DA.
Well, you've been talking about the prospect of an EFF leadership. You've been looking about the introspection that all parties need to do. Do you think the DA should be preparing to go into a coalition with the ANC?
Well, I suppose it depends on the election results. I mean, it's very much the DA campaign is against the ANC and the EFF. But I don't know what the permutation will be after the election. I mean, I don't have to make those decisions. They are difficult. Should the DA forever and a day write off any prospect of coalition with the ANC? I would say it depends on the terms. I think they must absolutely rule out doing anything with the EFF. And I think their first prize should be to collaborate with opposition formations outside of the governing party. But are there enough of them? Will there be enough? I simply don't know the answer to that. But I think, that's all part of the planning. But I hope that the DA will say, look, we are going to go after every supporter that we can get. And they still haven't got every supporter they could possibly get. But we also recognize there are people who really are very unhappy with the ANC, who hate the direction of the country, who are so deeply concerned about the fact that we don't have electricity, that we don't have jobs, that we have far too much corruption, far too little hope. That there are some of those folk in that voting corner who aren't going to vote for the DA. They might vote for other entities formed and to be formed. And can the DA, and I think the DA should, enter into a sort of arrangement with those like-minded parties who, for reasons of history, otherwise aren't the DA or aren't in the DA, and say, can we reach some kind of common cause where we don't simply cannibalize each other's votes, but we go after those voters? Now, it's difficult to do. There's a lot of bad blood and some contested history. But I think, given where the country is and where I think a lot of us would like it to be, that is a challenge worth taking and an opportunity worth seeking.
Isn't there a little bit of bad blood right now? You spoke of the Twitter caricature of the DA, but some people actually have a distaste for the party. And I don't know if you are willing to comment on the chairperson, Helen Zille, who has loomed large over the exit of the black leader you were talking about, Mmusi Maimane, and the exit of some other black leaders from the DA. Whether she says she's a liberal and is sticking to that, in some quarters she's seen as quite conservative, even right-wing, the DA losing support to FF+. Do you think she's been at all detrimental to your prospects, to the DA's prospects?
Well, I can't answer that question. I mean, she was more successful as party leader than I was, in the sense that she got more votes on the scoreboard than I managed to achieve. Of course, the circumstances had changed, and that job, in a way, had got easier for the DA, but that had quite a lot to do with her as the leader. And I need to remind you, Francis, and viewers of a certain vintage or age, that when I stood down as leader of the DA in 2007, Helen was regarded at the time as being a much kinder, gentler, more less aggressive successor than I had been, because I was regarded as very strident, very in your face, Mr. Fightback, all those things. So, I think perceptions change over time. Even if the person doesn't stay, even the person remains unchanged, the longer you're in the political arena, the easier it is to stick labels on you. And Helen, has been around now for a great deal of time. But, her decision to go back into the ring as the chairperson of the Federal Council was obviously controversial. But I have to say, the party endorsed it. It is the party's decision and determination that she holds that office. So that is the party's decision, and that's the choice they make. And I'm sure that they and she will make the best of that choice. But, it's not that she imposed herself from above and said, I'm now coming back as the chairman. It was the party in a contest election against Ethel Trollip, I recall, in 2019, that made her the chairperson of the Federal Council. And that's why she served in that position, and that's presumably why she's been re-elected unopposed. So my views, your views, any views, I think have to be coloured by the fact that she is extremely popular and therefore very effective inside the DA.
All right. Well, thank you for being willing to comment. And we were looking at the prospects for the DA in general earlier. Thank you, DA leader, former leader and columnist Tony Leon.